Hi, welcome to Gooder Talk. I'm Ken Adams. Today I want to talk to you about thematic speeches. They're a great way to share a great message with your audience. Now, when I joined Toastmasters, I needed to give an icebreaker speech, and I used the thematic speech approach. Now, in my speech, I talked about coincidence. There were 3 times in my life that I could remember at that time that I felt I wanted to tell a story about coincidence. Now, the first story was when I was a kid. I was with my family. We were driving home from Vermont towards Texas, and we were in Ohio. And as we're driving along in our station wagon on the highway, we look over to the side, and there's somebody in the car that's pointing at the back of our car. And so my dad started wondering there must have been something wrong, so we found quickly a rest stop, and so we pulled off the highway, and the car followed us as well. And so we pulled into the parking lot, everybody got out of the car, and this older couple stepped out of their car, and they just wanted to point out that it looked like our tarp that had been tied to the top of our car to cover up some things that we're bringing home from Vermont had come loose. The rope was untied and it was flapping, and so he just wanted to let us know. And so my dad went over and he started to repair it and got it all tight. And while he finished that off, we were talking to these 2 people, and we saw that their car had a Texas license plate. And so my dad asked, well, what part of Texas are you from? And they said they were from San Antonio. And they asked where we're from, and we said we're from Amarillo. Well, to make a long story short, we find out that they were the parents of our pastor and his wife. Imagine that. We're from Texas. We're in Ohio. We're on a highway, and the couple just happens to pull us over to help us, and they're the parents of our pastor and his wife. Crazy coincidence. Another time, when I was in college, I was doing summer theater out in Utah, and 2 buddies of mine who were in the show with me had driven to another town that was about 30 miles away, and we were coming back from having seen a movie. It was late at night, it was dark, it was on a 2-lane road, and the 2 friends were sitting up front listening to music, and I was sitting in the back seat reading a Stephen King novel. Now, I'm reading the novel, and I flip the page, and I notice on the radio the lyrics that were being sung. And as I'm reading my page in the Stephen King novel, the exact lyrics that were on the radio in Utah were on the page that I was reading. Exactly. I followed it along, and I could hear it from the radio. It was the craziest thing. I had to show my friends, and they kept telling me to throw the book out the window. But I just thought it was a coincidence. And then my last example during that speech was when my wife and I had won a trip to Rome with the company. And we met 3 other couples on that trip that we really liked. And we just seemed to have the same interests and just happened to be taking the same excursions. And so at the end of the week, we had a banquet. And we decided that the 4 of us, or the 4 couples, would sit together at a table and enjoy our last evening in Rome. Well, we all got to our table. We're all about to sit down. And this guy walks up from, looks like he's pretty official, and he talks to one of the guys in our group. And he says, no, you need to come and sit at the head table because you're one of our main sponsors, and you need to have some things to say. And so one of the couples had to get up and leave. And we, didn't really think that was quite right, but we figured out we could live with it. And a few minutes later, another couple came and sat down, and I was still kind of a little peeved that, our little group that had decided we're going to spend our last night together was forced to leave. Well, I started talking to this man who was sitting beside me, and it took me a while for him to kind of open up, but ultimately I found out where he was from, and he was from a state that I had some family who was living there. And then I asked him what part of the state he lived in, and then I figured out that he was near where I thought one of my cousins lived. And so I just mentioned, hey, do you know a judge by the name of X? And he looks at me and he goes, absolutely, she's one of my customers. And so we got to sit and talk about my cousin for the rest of the evening, along with the others at the table. But it's just interesting how coincidental things fell together so that I could meet someone who knows my cousin who I hadn't seen in about 20 years. So that was basically the meat of my speech. It was those three simple stories about a coincidental time in my life, and I shared those three things, and that was basically my icebreaker speech. And you can follow any pattern you want, but the thematic approach is a pretty good one. Find something that's going on in your life or that you've lived through or that you want to share with an audience, and maybe you can pick three stories from your life that you could point out in your speech. Now, what you can do is you can find your own theme, and whatever that theme is that you're interested in, think back to some stories that have happened in your life, some activities or people you've met or whatever it is, and find three of them that fit that theme and figure out a way to tell those three stories to support the theme that you've chosen. And then before you present the speech, you need to put an introduction and a conclusion together that kind of talks about the theme. It grabs their attention at the beginning. You give those three stories, and then you end with a great ending that ties back to your introduction and ties the whole thing up into a nice little speech. Well, that's the thematic approach. I hope this gives you an opportunity to maybe try something different from the speeches that you may have been giving. And it's a great way to throw together a quick speech if you want to do something pretty fast. Just write down the three stories you want to share, come up with a theme that they all kind of fall into, put in an introduction and a conclusion, and you're ready to go. All right, well, I hope this video is helpful to you on the thematic approach to giving a speech. And if it is, please give me a thumbs up and or hit the subscribe button. I have some other videos on other types of speeches that you might want to give and some other approaches that might help you give your best speech. Thank you.